10th Amendment, which leaves general policing to the law enforcement, to the states, has been forgotten. Maybe what happened was your secret police were poorly trained, just like your Bureau of Prisons guards were poorly trained and allowed the most notorious inmate in our nation's last several years, Jeffrey Epstein, to conveniently commit suicide. Sad. You misled Congress and the American people about Special Counsel Mueller's findings with your, quote, summary, unquote, of his report. It was issued about a month before you released the redacted portion of the Mueller report. But you set the stage. You set the stage such that the Special Counsel objected to the accuracy of how it was reported by the press and what you said. And federal judge Reggie Walton, appointed by George W. Bush, declared in a ruling that your summary was, quote, distorted, unquote, and misleading, unquote, and that the court could not trust you.
A very animated Congressman Steve Cohen, who I really like, from Tennessee, grilling William Barr during his farcical testimony the other day. I'm Randy Credico, by the way, and this is Randy Credico Live on the Fly. We have a very interesting show today. It's interesting because I'm interviewing a prosecutor, former prosecutor, and everybody that knows me knows that I've spent like most of the last 25 years working with defense attorneys and working to get people out of prison. This prosecutor put people in prison, as prosecutors do, but a lot of bad people, and I really admire him. I've gotten to know him really well. You've seen him on MSNBC. He's like a regular contributor. And he's really quite a character, and not a character, but quite a wonderful individual and remarkable mind. You can see him at his YouTube site, and I would go watch those because they're scary. Some of the 12-minute monologues that he gives, and that's Glenn Kirschner. Kirschner is a true partisan. Or patriot, and I use them both as superlatives, and he really is. And today we're going to talk about the danger of a second term by Donald Trump. If there is an election, you may have seen him tweet out that we may have to postpone this. Why ever have an election? I think that Glenn Kirschner will tell you all about the crimes committed by Trump and by William Barr. He lays it out in his own unique way. It's really disturbing when you see so many people enabling this president, and I want to go back to a movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And this is Jimmy Stewart from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I'm wondering, where is the Republican congressman or senator who will do what Jimmy Stewart did in this movie? Here we go.
Get up there with that lady that's up on top of this Capitol dome, that lady that stands for liberty. Take a look at this country through her eyes if you really want to see something. And you won't just see scenery. You'll see the whole parade of what man's carved out for himself after centuries of fighting. And fighting for something better than just jungle. So he can stand on his own 2 feet, free and decent, like he was created. No matter what his race, color, or creed. That's what you see. There's no place out there for graft, or greed, or lies, or compromise with human liberties. And if that's what the grown-ups have done with this world that was given to them, then we better get those boys' camps started fast and see what the kids can do. And it's not too late. Because this country is bigger than the tailors or you or me or anything else. Great principles don't get lost once they come to light. They're right here. You just have to see them again.
I guess this is just another lost cause, Mr. Payne. All you people don't know about lost causes. Mr. Payne does. He said once they were the only causes worth fighting for. And he fought for them once. For the only reason any man ever fights for them.
Because of just one plain simple rule. Love thy neighbor. And in this world today full of hatred, a man who knows that one rule has a great trust. You know that rule, Mr. Payne. And I loved you for it just as my father did. And you know that you fight for the lost causes harder than for any others. Yes, you even die for them. Like a man we both knew, Mr. Payne. You think I'm licked? You all think I'm licked. Well, I'm not licked. And I'm going to stay right here and fight for this lost cause, even if this room gets filled with lies like these. And the tailors and all their armies come marching into this place. Somebody will listen to me.
All right. Frank Capra's classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Would be great if we had just one person like that stand up against Trump, the way Jimmy Stewart stood up against Claude Rains in that classic film. All right, we're going to, my father used to run a club in Southern California called the Royal Tahitian, and that's where I developed this DNA for show business. You know, I was a comic for most of my life, and it was because of this experience growing up at the Royal Tahitian. We're going to put there you go, there's the Royal Tahitian. Everybody performed there, including Louis Armstrong. I got to hang out with Louis Armstrong backstage a number of times, James Brown, Ray Charles, and just countless others who worked at the Royal Tahitian. So we're going to play Mac the Knife, which I used to perform as Louis Armstrong. Da, 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 da. All right, enough of that. And we'll be right back with my good buddy, Glenn Kirschner.
Oh, the shark has pretty teeth, dear, and he shows them fairly white. Just a jackknife as McHeath, dear, and he keeps it out of sight. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves, though, wears McHeath, dear, so there's not a trace of red. Oh, on the sidewalk Sunday morning lies a body oozing life. Someone sneaking around the corner. Is that someone? Mac the Knife, yeah.
Louis Armstrong, Mac the Knife. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly, and as promised, we are now being joined by a real partisan, a real hero, and someone I respect. And it's really amazing that because I'm a defense attorney type of guy. Glenn is, as I said, 30 years as a prosecutor and as a federal prosecutor in DC, where I last appeared in front of an audience. I think was way back in, I think it was in December. And, but Glenn I want to tell you something. If there is a coup here, if there is, what seems to be going on, then Glenn will be one of the first ones that will end up in some kind of concentration camp. So I'm serious when I say that, Glenn. Glenn Kirschner, thank you for joining us.
Wow, that's kind of a scary introduction. I'm going to end up in a concentration camp.
Well, you know what I mean.
I do.
Look, there's a lot of hyperbole out there when it comes to Trump. But after that tweet this morning about postponing the elections, I've seen you talk about this. You take it seriously. It's like you look at this, you've been watching it very closely. Let's go over that tweet this morning about postponing the elections. How serious is he, and is it possible?
Well, here's the thing. I have been tweeting about this all morning as I've been sort of watching President Obama's eulogy at Representative John Lewis's service, which was it was so stirring and inspirational. But here's my issue with the question, can he do it? The answer is, can he do it legally? No. But you know what, Randy? Anything is possible criminally. And that's what Donald Trump and Bill Barr, and I'm going to throw Mike Pompeo in there for free, that's what these men are about, abusing the law to their own ends and, depriving we the people of various rights that we have. So when I saw that this morning, Donald Trump sending up a trial balloon, maybe I'll just postpone the election, I tweeted something out that's going to sound hyperbolic, but we are in a post-hyperbole society, right? Just like we're in a post-irony society, given how Donald Trump has conducted himself. I tweeted out, you know what? There's not a lot of daylight between Trump and Barr sending up a trial balloon about postponing a presidential election on the one hand, and sending up a trial balloon that, you know what, we're thinking about incarcerating all registered Democrats so they can't vote. People will say, that's crazy, that's hyperbolic. That is this lawless administration. Both of those things I just recited are criminal. It's just a matter of degree. And they are willing to break the law to achieve their ends. They've been doing it for 3.5 years. So do I take it seriously? As a former career federal prosecutor, you're darn right I take it serious.
As a federal prosecutor in D.C., Washington, D.C., and I know you dealt with major homicides and RICO cases and other public corruption cases, I believe. That's the same bailiwick where, Barr basically purged recently, including the 4 gentlemen that were involved in the prosecution of Roger Stone. I don't want to get too much into the Stone thing, but you were there. What was your take on the Barr getting involved in the Stone case, and like the other day saying that he's a 67-year-old man? Did you fall for that?
No. Bill Barr has corrupted all things Department of Justice. So the trial team in the Stone case, I don't have to tell you, but I worked with 2 of the 4 gentlemen, one fairly closely, John Kravis. We were both in the homicide section together. And I know these attorneys. They are straight up, hardworking, honorable, honest, ethical career prosecutors. They were doing the right thing at every turn. And when Bill Barr swooped in and basically said, listen, I know that you all have come up with a sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone, and I know it's in compliance with the federal sentencing guidelines that apply to every single case of every single defendant in the federal criminal justice system. But this man, Roger Stone, is a buddy of the president's. In fact, he's a criminal associate of the president's who held fast, didn't flip, didn't cooperate, didn't incriminate the president. So we are going to dramatically reduce our sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone. All 4 prosecutors, as you well know, said, we're out. That's not the way, fair and equal justice is supposed to apply. And, That is just one instance of the many abuses of the criminal justice system by Bill Barr.
Right. Well, look, I wrote a letter to the judge, Judge Amy Berman Jackson, and I spoke to you about this, that I was going to do it. I mean, you've kind of helped me out over the last 8 months, and I said that well, I have a prison reform background. I had a father that went to prison, and I said in there that I wasn't threatened by Roger himself. And I put that in there. If you parse that, but there are other people that I was fearful of. So when Barr comes out and says it, well, he said it the other day. He said, well, the guy, he said it, he wasn't threatened, but that I'm in a place right now, I'm away from it all. You know what I mean? I've been away from where I used to live for at least 2 years, since May of 2018. So I found it a little ironic that he would say that in this case about Stone, when there are so many others. How many others should have gotten clemency or had their cases, or what do you call it, had their cases
Commuted.
pardoned
Their
or
sentences commuted.
I mean, how many cases do you think in the federal system would be applicable under the kind of criteria that he used the other day?
Oh, under his criteria? Well, first of all, his true criteria is a friend of the president, as we see now in Mike Flynn's case, which Bill Barr has forever been trying to tank. And there was some good news coming out of the appellate court today on the Flynn case. But under Barr's criteria, you have to be a friend of the president. Under the Department of Justice criteria, there is what's called the Office of the Pardon Attorney. And they take in requests for pardons, for commutations, for clemency, and they go through a rigorous investigation and vetting. And they make sure that it's apolitical, that there is no political bias or pressure that comes to bear on these decisions. And then, at least historically, the Office of the Pardon Attorney would make a recommendation to the White House. All of that has gone out the window. So there really are no rules right now. Much as Donald Trump acts as, or tries to act as, king of the country, Bill Barr tries to act as king of the Department of Justice, and he runs roughshod over the criminal justice system.
Do you think Bill Barr has any liability if Trump loses, and when he does lose, if he leaves office? Is there any liability for criminally against Bill Barr? And is that the reason why he's hitched his wagon so closely to Trump's star?
Yes, there is absolutely criminal liability, and it started on the day he testified at his own confirmation hearing, when Senator Kamala Harris asked him, Mr. Barr, has anybody at the White House, including the president, asked you to open an investigation into anyone, or suggested you open an investigation into anyone? Bill Barr, I could see the lies. Randy, I've been in 1,000 witness interviews and suspect interrogations. You could see the lies. He was hemming and hawing and looking up and buying for time. And then ultimately he tells us, well, I have to grapple with what the word suggested means. Bill, you're a smart guy. You don't have to grapple with what the word suggested means. And here's the answer that he settled on under oath. I don't know, right? People are like, well, you can't charge him with perjury, with a false statement to Congress under 18 U.S.C. 1001. That's the federal section for false statements to Congress. You can't charge him with perjury because he said, I don't know. To which I respond, do you think I could have done my work as a prosecutor if I had to accept the answer, I don't know, from every witness I put in the grand jury and from every witness I called to trial? That would be the magic answer. That would get everybody out of everything. But here's the thing. He did know, which is exactly why he didn't want to answer the question. If I'm placed under oath and I'm asked, Mr. Kirschner, what's your middle name? And I say, I don't know. That's perjury because I do know. Bill Barr did know. That was the first count of false statement to Congress that he picked up on the very day he testified at his own confirmation hearing. Now, moving forward, he lied in his testimony before Congress. There was a day before yesterday, multiple times. He assaulted I use that word advisedly, the way it's used in the criminal law. He assaulted peaceful protesters at Lafayette Park by gassing them and flashbanging them when they were not posing a threat to the safety or security of federal property or any human being. That is a criminal assault. It also happens to be a deprivation of their First Amendment free speech rights and rights to peaceably assemble. So, you know, there are probably a dozen crimes that Bill Barr has committed that I could tick off, and you're darn right he's got criminal responsibility for them. And that's why in January, when we have a law-abiding president and a law-enforcing attorney general, we open grand jury investigations, and we investigate fully, fairly, honestly, and apolitically, and then we let the grand juries decide who to charge, what to charge, you know, with what crimes, and we live by the voice and the conscience of the community, the grand jury, and we play it straight. We don't bring any ham sandwiches into the grand jury. We just live and die based on a fair assessment of the evidence. That will result in criminal charges against Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, Bill Barr, and probably Steve Mnuchin and Betsy DeVos and, you know, Wheeler, and you could just go on and on and on.
I mean, this is definitely, I played a clip from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in my opening, and he talked about lost causes. He talked about corruption, the Claude Rains character, the corruption. Do we have someone in the Republican Party that will stand up like Jimmy Stewart did in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
No, not at the moment. Yes, we have Romney, who in fits and starts has, you know, flexed the tiniest of patriotic muscles that a person can have. But at the moment, we don't seem to have anybody in the Republican Party who will stand up to Trump's lawlessness. That has been, I think, the single most eye-opening experience for me. I honestly thought, naively so, that there was a certain baseline of patriotism below which no person in Congress would sink. But all of the Republicans have sunk below that line, and they've gone so much farther down in following Trump really to the extinction of the Republican Party, which is where they are all headed.
Well, I understand when you know, the cabinet ministers, they can say, well, I was just following orders. But, you know, if you're a representative, you got to follow the orders of your constituency. So they really don't have an out on this, you know, whether it be Lindsey Graham, McConnell, or Cruz. They really don't have an out. I mean, why hasn't anyone today said anything about Trump's tweet this morning about possibly postponing the elections?
I don't know. I just saw a clip from Mitch McConnell where he actually said, in the history of the country, through wars and plagues, we have never postponed an election, and basically we're not going to do it this time, which was a rare moment of decency from Mitch McConnell, who has otherwise really been the stone cold enemy of the Republic, the way he has crammed unqualified judges down the throats of the American people. We've got a three-part plan to unpack the courts, but, you know, he really has been an enemy of the people, and the people in his state more than any suffer. But he actually stood up and said today, that's not going to happen. But most of the other Republicans wouldn't even comment. Why? For fear that the president would tweet about them in a demeaning or derogatory manner. I mean, these men and women are not stand-up people.
I'm looking for someone like Margaret Chase Smith, who stood up against McCarthy, and she was Republican, that stood up against him and finally called him out. I mean, you would think there'd be somebody, not even Susan Collins has come out there and slammed him for this outrageous tweet and this outrageous trial balloon. I don't think it's a trial balloon. I think he's serious.
And I wonder, you know, I've been asking everybody who I thought might have some insight into this question. What is it that keeps the Republicans quiet? Is it simply fear of a nasty tweet that they think will then hurt their reelection chances? Or is it something more sinister? The one thing, Randy, that has always sat in the back of my mind is that the Russians hacked both the DNC server and the RNC server. So they had all the Democrats' emails, and what did they do? They washed them through Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. I know I was going to make a really bad joke.
All right,
now,
man. Listen, we're going to disagree on that a little bit, but
okay.
all right,
okay,
we're going to disagree on that.
Part. But
all
let's. I think we can agree on the fact that these emails were released and weaponized, and they were used to Donald Trump's advantage, and they were used to Hillary Clinton's detriment. What have we never seen? Have we seen one single derogatory email from the RNC server? No.
I don't know who has those, Glenn, but do you think that's the only reason why Hillary Clinton lost? I have a guest on the other day saying that Trump has already stolen the 2020 election with voter suppression. How big a role did voter suppression and particularly minority voter suppression play in 2016?
I mean, nobody knows. I can tell you my view of it is that the disinformation campaign by the Russians, as exposed by Bob Mueller, was huge because so many people get their news, they get their information, they form their opinions based on what they see on social media. If that wasn't the case, social media wouldn't be as wildly popular and profitable as it is. So all of that disinformation, it swayed voters' opinions. No two ways about it. But, and then I think people, frankly, were sick and tired of establishment candidates. I mean, they were probably saying things like, enough with the Bushes, enough with the Clintons, we've had enough of this. It's time to change the paradigm. And maybe if we bring an insider, a big, brash, apparently successful outsider and make him president, so I think there was some of that going on. I'm not entirely confident that voter systems weren't hacked in and of themselves in those 3 or 4 most pivotal states. I don't know that, but I think it was a confluence of all those things. And I think, listen, Hillary Clinton didn't excite people and she didn't drive them to the polls. So, I think the calculus is different in every presidential election. And I think it was a perfect storm that got us a perfectly horrible president.
Well, I want to pick on this voter suppression a little bit and get back to Roger Stone, because I thought that the voter suppression, he basically was exemplified the voter suppression techniques, having poll watchers with his PAC. He did have poll watchers. Well, you can tell me about poll watchers in a minute, but also he tried to sell me on a story of someone who claimed bogusly to be Bill Clinton's bastard son, and I can't even think, Danny Williams. And I went and spoke to the guy, and I refused to put him on my show back then. But Stone had supposedly paid tons of money on Facebook ads, putting this guy's story out there, cynically using a black man to suppress the black vote. And so let's just talk about poll watchers in a minute. What is their MO, and what is the foundation of poll watchers?
Well, I mean, you can have legitimate poll watchers who are there to ensure that everybody has a free and fair opportunity to get to the polls, that nobody is impeded, that the polls themselves are run in an above-board, apolitical manner. And then you can have the kind of poll watchers who are modified stormtroopers who are going in there to chill voters from exercising their rights. And there are probably, I'm not a poll watcher expert, but there are probably 100 different tactics ranging from the relatively benign to the quite dangerous and destructive and dramatic to try to chill people from exercising their right to vote.
I want to move back to Barr for just a minute and his testimony on Tuesday, in which he did not get involved and gave some convoluted answer why he did not get involved in Michigan when that was certainly a clear and present danger. Was that within the purview of the Justice Department, what was happening there in the State House by those armed thugs?
So I'll try to give you both sides of the equation here. First of all, the federal government has every right to deploy federal officers and agents to protect federal property and protect federal employees. So when it comes to Portland, first of all, and then I'll move to Michigan. You know, the federal government has an interest and a right to protect the federal courthouse there. The question is, how do they discharge those duties? Do they overstep their bounds? Do they go out in, you know, rented vans wearing unmarked uniforms and abduct people that are loosely suspected of having done something wrong hours or days earlier? Well, that's obviously not permitted and that's not lawful. So when you talk about the Michigan State House, that's state property. That's not federal property. And so it's up to the Michigan state government and its law enforcement organizations to provide protection for the Michigan State House. I will also say, you know, the Portland protests, they did get pretty aggressive. They got dangerous. They did try to burn down the courthouse, I was told. And frankly, that's not something we can endure or endorse.
Right.
The question is, law enforcement agents have a responsibility to use the minimum amount of force necessary to protect federal property. And it doesn't look like they were doing that in Portland. Now, in Michigan, I saw a lot of yelling. I saw a lot of screaming. I saw a lot of nasty people with long guns. And I didn't see the kind of destruction or attempted arson of the Michigan State House that I think might have required a more dramatic response. But what Donald Trump doesn't understand and what Bill Barr doesn't care about is the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. That is what restricts the federal government and says you can only do the relatively few things enumerated, spelled out in the Constitution, because those are the only powers you're granted as the federal government. The states and the people, their powers are unlimited. And Bill Barr doesn't care about it, and Donald Trump doesn't understand it. That's why Donald Trump will say things like, we're going to go into Portland and sweep it all out. You can't do that constitutionally. Will Bill Barr issue a legal opinion that he can? Well, that's my fear always, is that Bill Barr has, you know, got the back of the president in whatever corruption he is attempting. But if you're following the Constitution, there's a separation between the federal powers and the state powers.
Well, this focus on Portland and the vast majority, overwhelming majority, including the vets that came out, the moms that came out, right? They were peaceful. I don't know if there were agent provocateurs in there. You never know. But we also don't know who is operating these vans. Is it possible that they are private contractors, people like Eric Prince, who's the brother of Betsy DeVos?
And that was an opportunity lost during Bill Barr's testimony. I really wish, and I had been tweeting about this, I really wished somebody had asked him some pointed questions about what federal officers and agents are involved in protecting the federal courthouse in Portland. Because if it is simply the U.S. Marshals, they're entitled to be there and do that kind of work. If it's the Federal Protective Service, FPS, that's an organization under the umbrella of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. It is their job and their mission to protect federal property. They have every right and reason to be there. But have we contracted with private security firms like Blackwater, or whatever Blackwater is called today? My former office prosecuted Blackwater contractors 3 times for a mass murder they committed in Iraq. And it was horrific what Eric Prince's troops did out there. They're not all bad, because we actually flipped and turned some of the Blackwater contractors, and they testified against their fellow team members about the murders that they committed. But if Eric Prince is now supplying some sort of contractors to supplement our federal law enforcement efforts in Portland, the American people have a right to know it. I want to know how much of my taxpayer money is being funneled into the coffers of a guy like Eric Prince, Betsy DeVos's brother.
Yeah, he's a pretty despicable human being. Yeah, by the way, that was while you were in D.C., in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, that you went after them. You also spent 6 years as a prosecutor in the Army, I believe. And
Yep.
and so you court-martialed a lot of. What kind of cases were you involved in when you were?
So, soldiers get in all of the same criminal trouble that civilians get into. So I handled, all of the run-of-the-mill stuff, including an attempted bombing, though it was a relatively low-level bombing in Anchorage, Alaska, when I was assigned to Fort Richardson, the 6th Infantry Division up in Anchorage, Alaska. But your assaults and your arsons and your robberies and your burglaries. I also worked as an appellate prosecutor in the Army. So first I was a trial court prosecutor, prosecuting court-martial cases. And then I was transferred to the Army's Government Appellate Division. So when a soldier was convicted and he or she would appeal their conviction, I would be the prosecutor in the appellate courts. There I handled, espionage and capital murder cases, espionage out of Desert Storm, capital murder cases out of Fort Bragg, and a whole bunch of other sort of garden variety crimes. So my 6.5 years of active duty was a really sort of exciting, vibrant practice of criminal law. And I got to do the whole time as a prosecutor, which is a very unusual trajectory for an Army JAG. Usually we have to do 18 months as a prosecutor, 18 months as an administrative lawyer, 18 months as an operations lawyer, 18 months as a legal assistance lawyer, and it goes on and on. My supervisors, for whatever reason, maybe thought I was not qualified or well-tempered to do anything else, and they let me prosecute for the entire 6+ years.
The Eric Prince, the Blackwater defendants wouldn't have fallen under your purview if that had happened then. It only would happen in a criminal courtroom because they were civilians.
They were civilians, right. So we prosecuted them in the civilian courts, obviously, in federal district court in Washington, D.C. And, I wasn't assigned to that team, but some of my closest friends were, so I provided support. And, we brought folks from Iraq. We brought, countless victims, because I forget how many they killed and how many were shot and wounded but survived the massacre and attempted massacre. But, we brought dozens and dozens and dozens of people over from Iraq. And I can tell you, they were, I think, surprised that the federal government in the United States was working so hard, working its tail off to try to bring justice to what was done to those Iraqi citizens. And people poured their hearts and their souls into that prosecution to hold these Blackwater contractors accountable for what they did.
And I think he's probably very close to the president, Eric Prince. How shady, dark of a character is he in so many words, Glenn?
I'm not going to go there because I don't have firsthand personal knowledge of what that man has been up to. I haven't seen much that gives me confidence that he's an above board guy who, if he is providing contracting services to the United States government, is doing it honestly and ethically and training his contractors to the hilt so they, only engage in appropriate police tactics and security tactics. My sense of him is that he's a grifter and he's in it for himself, and he's probably, along with the rest of Trump's cronies and cabinet members, grifting off the government, stealing our taxpayer dollars.
It's very scary. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was operating either directly or peripherally in Portland. And the Portland escalation by the president, that to me is an obvious red herring or a ruse. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think what he's doing, he's taking a page out of the terrorists' playbook. And what I mean by that is when terrorists want to have an impact on a civilian population, they can't go into every city and every town and every enclave and do damage sort of on a broad scale. So what do? They strike a subway, they strike a bus, they strike a theater, they strike something that will then instill fear and panic in the larger population. This is what Donald Trump is doing, right? He's sending federal, and I will always say, most of the officers I worked with federally and locally are good stand-up people who are trying to protect and defend, but the ones who aren't ruin it for everybody. Most pointedly, they ruin it for the citizenry who are the victims of their abuse. But I think what Donald Trump is trying to do is send these federal forces just to a few cities. Why? Because he wants the footage, the nightly footage from what's going on in Portland to permeate the country and scare everyone. And I think it is designed, ultimately, I think it's all designed to chill voting in November. I think that's his goal with everything, including his intentionally neglecting to deal with our national health emergency. He wants it to spread because he also sees that as a vehicle to chill voters in November. It's all calculated to that end.
His whole response, is there any criminal liability, his response to the corona plague?
There is. And, you know, I have lots of friends who are legal analysts who don't necessarily share this opinion. What I will say is that 22 of my 30 years as a prosecutor, I was a homicide prosecutor in Washington, D.C. I learned how to handle murder cases under Bob Mueller as my direct supervisor and chief of the homicide section. A few years after he left, I became chief of the homicide section, responsible for all murder prosecutions in Washington, D.C. If there's one thing I know, I don't claim to be an expert on much, Randy, but I know my way around murder cases. I know the elements that are required to prove the various levels of homicide, and I know what defenses will and will not work. And here is why Donald Trump has homicide liability for the way he has mismanaged the coronavirus pandemic. The lowest level of homicide is called different things in different jurisdictions. Some people call it involuntary manslaughter. Some jurisdictions call it negligent homicide. It's all basically the same thing. It requires proof of three elements, three things, three facts. The first element is that you do something in a grossly negligent way, or you have a responsibility to do something, like you're a police officer and you have to respond to an incident, to a citizen in distress, and you fail to do it in a grossly negligent way. That's element number one, acting or failing to act in a grossly negligent way. Donald Trump wakes up every day and does something that is grossly negligent when it comes to his coronavirus failures. He fulfills element one. Element two, your grossly negligent act or failure to act is reasonably likely to inflict death or serious bodily injury on another. I'm going to check that box because the coronavirus is a potentially deadly virus. So Donald Trump's gross negligence is reasonably likely to result in death or serious bodily injury to another. The third element is that by your gross negligence, you caused the death of another. And that's where people get hung up, because they think of you causing the death of another as firing a gun at somebody or strangling them or hitting them with a brick and killing them. You've caused their death, right? That's not the way the law defines causation. The law says if your conduct is a substantial factor in bringing about the death of another, then under the law, you are deemed to have caused their death. Let me give you a quick hypothetical. We had a murder case in DC where a bad guy, a would-be robber, was chasing a victim, trying to rob him. As the victim flees, he darts between two parked cars out into the street. He gets hit by a car and he dies. What killed him? What was his cause of death? The car running over him. That's what killed him. But the guy who was chasing him and causing him to dart out into the street, his conduct was a substantial factor in bringing about the victim's death. We charged him with manslaughter and he was convicted of manslaughter. The same principle holds true. Donald Trump, his conduct, his gross negligence has been a substantial factor in people dying of the coronavirus. I would draft that indictment in a minute. I would walk into court. I predict I would win that case hands down, and then we'll fight it in the appellate court to see if the appellate judges believe it's a sound legal theory, and I think they would side with me.
He doesn't seem to matter. bothered by 150,000 people dying of this. He has encouraged it. He's given quack advice to remedy this virus, this sickness, this disease.
Yeah, dead people are gum on his shoe.
He doesn't care. He just doesn't care. He's such a megalomaniac, and I'm very fearful. This is the first time. I haven't voted for a Democrat. I mean, I live in New York, so it doesn't matter. But it does matter this time because I think we're going to have to pile it on. I do not like Joe Biden's politics, but I think since I voted for McGovern, my very first vote, that I think that this time around, I'm going to, and I'm saying it here, I'm going to have to vote for Biden because he's going to have to, it's like a handicap. He's got to win by 12, 14 points for this guy to possibly even leave.
Yeah.
What is your take on that? I mean, I have a friend of mine that's running on the Green Party line, but this is not one, because the stakes are really big this time around. How big are the stakes?
I think the future of the republic hangs in the balance. And the reason I say that, look at where Donald Trump has taken us in 3.5 years, to 150,000 dead Americans because of his grossly negligent mismanagement of the coronavirus. And sadly, we're counting. That number is rising. We have an economy that just contracted by 1/3 today, we are told. I don't know how many tens of millions of people are on unemployment right now, trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from. This and the racial divide, with the president now saying we're not going to let low-income housing come into your suburbs. He is running on an affirmatively segregationist platform. This is insanity. This is something. And when I say we can't survive another 4 years of this, we can't survive another 4 years of the tandem, of the team of Donald Trump and Bill Barr. We will be done as a republic. I don't know what we'll be, but we will not be a democracy.
Wait a second. He said he was going to clean up the swamp. Is it a moat now with alligators?
Yeah, he's filled
monsters?
the swamp. Yeah, he has filled the swamp, and it is overflow. 1,000 rotor-rooter trucks couldn't come and clear this thing out.
I've never seen corruption as rife as it is right now. I mean, we get cases here, Abscam. You had cases throughout. Every so often you get a big corruption case, but nothing like what's happening right now. But they seem to just do it with impunity. Do people like Steve Mnuchin and Larry Kudlow actually believe that what they're doing is right? Are they in fear? And do they think that they're going to be able to walk away with this?
Great question. So, 2 questions. Do they believe what they're doing is right because they define right as whatever enriches them? Yes, they think what they're doing is right because it's right for their bank account. And just as a quick footnote to that, I spent so many years, decades in fact, arguing to juries that what we are going to prove to you with the evidence, ladies and gentlemen, is not going to make a lot of sense, because you're going to sit there and say, I would never act like that. I would never kill somebody. I would never set the car on fire to cover up the crime by burning their body. I would not. That's exactly right. So because you try to do what's right, so it doesn't make sense to you. To Mnuchin and Ross and the rest of these knuckleheads, they define what's right by what enriches them, what increases the balance in their bank account. So they think what they are doing is right.
Right. Do
I think they're going to get caught? Do I think they're going to get held accountable? Here's my greatest fear and suspicion right now, that Donald Trump, if we could go look in the lower right-hand drawer of his desk in the Oval Office, it would be filled with a stack of pre-printed pardons for every family member, every cabinet member, every member of the Senate who voted against conviction and removal, every governor that has behaved like a good little girl and boy the way Donald Trump wanted him or her to behave, like DeSantis opened Florida, I don't care how many people die, all of those people will be delivered pardons. And then it's going to be our job, beginning in January 2021, to go into the courts and fight those pardons as being the product of corruption, and they cannot stand.
Well, wait a second. You still have, like in the state of New York, you have a very active and a very able Manhattan District Attorney's office there that has some of the best prosecutors. I mean, you're not going to believe this, I actually worked for 1 year behind the scenes, but very closely involved with Robert Morgenthal's campaign in 2004 when he was running against a real reactionary judge by the name of Leslie Crocker Snyder. So I was really afraid of her taking over that office. And I used to spend once a week at Forlani's on Baxter Street with Bob Morgenthau, and he gave me some great cigars all the time. He gave me all the Cuban cigars that he got back in 63, 64. He had boxes and boxes. Hey, Randy, have all these. Trump doesn't escape the criminal liability in New York State. And can you just enumerate some of the transgressions that he has committed that are possible criminal indictments?
Yeah, obviously, I'm not privy to the evidence that New York State has. I know the district attorney's office is digging into him. The attorney general, Tish James, is digging into him. I would ask the hard question come 2021, why has Donald Trump been allowed to get away with the kind of open and notorious crime and corruption, even if it's only been on the white collar front, which should be taken more seriously than it is. You know, a kid who snatches a purse is going away for 5 years. A white collar criminal who snatches $10 billion from vulnerable victims is sentenced to 6 months home detention, basically sentenced to go watch HBO for 10 years or 6 months or whatever. Anyway, let me get my blood pressure back down. I don't know why Donald Trump has been allowed to skate. There's a lot of theories about why he's been allowed to skate for decades and decades in New York, but he's been engaged in all sorts of corrupt business practices. Why do you think he's fighting tooth and nail to keep his tax returns and his financial documents that his accounting firm Mazars has and his Deutsche Bank records? He has been fighting mightily to keep anybody from seeing those. And it's not because they're pristine, and it's not because they're going to show he's a legitimate billionaire. I'll be surprised if he's a legitimate thousandaire, you know? So he is, if the authorities in New York finally get around to doing their job, he's going to be held accountable for financial crimes that, you know, are probably off the charts.
All right, well, okay. I was going to ask, go through different crimes he's committed, the financial crimes, for instance, some of his crimes in office that he's committed. But people are not talking about this much. You know, having a sister that was raped, you know, I get choked up when I think. He has committed sexual abuse and possibly rape. Can he be prosecuted for that in various state bailiwicks?
It depends on two things. One, the quality of the evidence, and two, when I say the quality, you know, how much evidence is there in order to bring a case and be comfortable that you can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And then the second question is the statute of limitations. And Randy, I have 5 daughters that I've raised, and we've had 2 who were victims of sexual offenses. So I get choked up as well, and I know exactly that experience as a parent or as going through it with a loved one. So yes, Donald Trump is a serial sex offender. Will he ever ultimately be tried in a court for any of his sexual offenses? I don't know. He should be tried in court for any number of other offenses that are easily provable. You can start with his campaign finance violations that he committed as part of a conspiracy with Michael Cohen. The co-conspirator has already pled guilty to it and already implicated his co-conspirator, the person for whom he committed these crimes, right? The Karen McDougal and the Stormy Daniels payoffs and cover-ups. That's an easy one. A junior prosecutor can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt in her sleep. But then you move forward to his presidency. You've got obstruction of justice, 10 counts, meticulously documented by Bob Mueller. That document, volume 2 of the Mueller report, can be taken into a grand jury the minute after Joe Biden is sworn in, and we can return indictments, and I think we should, get an arrest warrant for Donald Trump so he doesn't flee the country. And that is for openers. He's also obstructed Congress. That is a federal felony when he told all of his administration officials, you must disobey lawfully issued congressional subpoenas. That's a crime. He committed what's called 1001, Section 1001 false statements when he lied in his written answers to Bob Mueller, which we can now prove, in fact, courtesy of some of what we learned in the Roger Stone prosecution. And he committed witness tampering. While Ambassador Yovanovitch was testifying, he was tweeting derogatory things about her that I would argue were designed to chill her testimony. That is, law school 101 witness tampering. I could go on. He bribed President Zelensky, right? I mean, we could go on all day about the criminal offenses that are so well documented and so easily proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the man needs to be arrested the minute Joe Biden takes office. That's my opinion.
He has intimidated a lot of witnesses. He's prevented a lot of people from testifying, and he has, circumvented, giving up his taxes. There's a lot there. He does have a base there, and his economic policy seems to favor the not 1%, but the 1% of the 1%. What do these people get? The average person that votes for him, the ones that show up at his rally, what do they get out of this Supreme Court and the federal judges and his economic policy? What's in it for them other than racist red meat?
Yeah, they get one thing and one thing only. They get to be a member of a team, Team Trump. And let's face it, I've been a Washington Redskins fan for decades. And the Washington Redskins fans, we are long suffering, right? They've been lousy for decades, but we keep rooting for them because we're a member of that team, so to speak. Some people will stick with a losing team rather than leave that team because then they have nothing. And it really is the racist red meat that I fear is what energizes some folks, because he's giving them people to look down on. And if he can give you somebody to look down on, no matter how dire your circumstances in life, you're not doing as poorly as the people that Trump hates, the African Americans, the Hispanics, the Chinese, because the flu was sent here intentionally to attack us. And so he gives people something and someone to hate. And more than love and more than power and more than money, hate is it's the strongest adhesive, and it's the most powerful motivator, because if there's nothing else left, you can still hate, and we can get together and we can hate the people that frankly are the source of our problems and our failures. That's what he gives people. He gives them hate.
Well, all right, but I agree with that. But economically, what do they get out of it? What kind of tax breaks are they getting?
They're not getting economically. They're getting nothing. What am I getting by going to Redskins Stadium and paying $12 for a hot dog and $15 for a cup of beer? I'm losing economically, but I still go watch my team because I'm on the Redskins team or I'm on Team Trump. Economics maybe that doesn't float everybody's boat.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, I can sympathize with you. I've been a Cleveland Brown fan all my life, and it goes at least Washington. I'm not going to call them the Redskins anymore. What are they going to call them?
That's a good question. I don't know what they're changing their name to, but it's long overdue, so I'm glad.
Yeah. I'm a Cleveland Indian fan, but I never tell anybody that. particularly since I have a lot of friends that are Native Americans. But I grew up with a pen in my hand, and I was part of that team. You know what I mean? And you can see what a drought I've had. Cleveland has not won since before I was born, the baseball team, and the football team, not since 1964, when they had Dr. Frank Ryan on the team as their quarterback. So, yeah, and I'll root for them. I'll lose money gambling on them, or I'll, go to the games and spend $12 for a hot dog. So, I mean, that's a pretty good point. But I dearly, we both need our baseball teams, or my baseball team, your football team, to change their names from Indians to something else and Redskins to something else right now. But at least you both admitted that you get infected with this, with a team. You get to, as a friend of mine said, his dad put a pennant in his hand when he was 4, and that was the team he was on going forward. Didn't matter how bad their season was, right? But at least you had, one of my favorite quarterbacks was Doug Williams, and he did pretty well against Denver way back. Even though he threw a ball so hard, you needed industrial gloves to catch that. I mean, how hard he threw those.
I was a center all my life. My pop was a high school football coach in Jersey. I was a center all my life in high school and college. So I hiked the ball and I was banging heads with a nose guard. Or if I was against the 4-man front, which I hated, I had to chase down the quicker linebackers, and I'm a slow guy. So,
you're the type of guy George Allen would have liked, a quarterback. Yeah. He was very good with his centers and the defensive front line. He was totally, in that pit there. What do you call it? The front line on both sides.
The trenches or the
trenches. Yeah, he was one of those guys. I'm not a fan of his son, but he was a pretty good coach. Glenn, let's just get to what's going to happen. And I do believe Trump will lose this election big time. If there's a fair election, they're going to do everything they can to stop it. I don't know what other kind of ruses or what other kind of mechanisms they will use. They will use it because this is their only chance, and not just for Trump, but for a lot of senators that are up for re-election. They are depending on some kind of chicanery here. But let's say he does lose, and let's just assume he loses. How is he going to leave? What's he going to do for the ensuing 2 months? What kind of powers can he?
He's going to burn everything down figuratively, hopefully not literally. He's going to issue across the board pardons to anybody. He'll probably set up a kiosk at the White House front door, pardons for sale. You got a loved one in prison, give me $1 million, I'll give you a pardon. It's going to be a fire sale of America's, institutions, and it's going to be horrific. And I don't know how we put a stop to it. We probably run into court early and often seeking injunctions, but you think he's been unconstrained for the past 3.5 years when he literally has nothing to lose between November and January. And I think he's going to get voted out in a landslide, unlike anything we've ever seen before. He's going to burn it all down. So we better hold on tight. It's going to be a real e-ticket ride.
It's Tony Montana time, I think, from Scarface, that he's going to go into the bunker, and because how is he going to face it? I just can't imagine this megalomaniac passing it off to somebody else come next January.
I do think he's likely to resign a couple of days before the end of his term and get Pence to pardon him. If Pence is politically self-destructive enough to do it, that would surprise me. But I think he will try to do that because he knows a self-pardon is not likely to be upheld by the courts. Believe it or not, there's even a Department of Justice, OLC, Office of Legal Counsel opinion saying a president can't self-pardon himself or herself. Of course, we can't indict a sitting criminal president, so I don't put a lot of stock into OLC opinions, but at least even the OLC says a president can't pardon himself.
Right. Some final thoughts about, and this is the reason why I wanted you on, was to talk about William Barr. Some final thoughts about Bill Barr and what happens if, in fact, he is given a full term as Attorney General.
I think we will continue to see a disregard for the rule of law, an unraveling of the rule of law. his appearance before Congress, where he was casual, he was smug, he was cavalier, and he had no regard for the truth, and he didn't even want to pretend to know or to convey that he had a handle on the facts of the questions that were being asked. He flip-flopped a number of times. He lied a number of times. I mean, he said flat out, Jeff Berman, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, stepped down. That was his sworn testimony. 30 seconds later, he said, well, he stepped down, but he didn't know he really stepped down.
Wait, is that not a term that you use, Glenn? He
No.
says that when I put out a statement like that the guy stepped down, it means that the guy was definitely
going to be fired. It means he's going to be fired. Here's the thing. What you put in a press release is not subject to the law of perjury. What you testify about is subject to the law of perjury. And he lied about it. He testified Jeff Berman stepped down. And then he said, well, not really. It's a nice term that we use because I was going to fire him. He still lied about it. He lied about that. He lied about several things. So what do we expect to see from Bill Barr? More of the same. And I just hope it doesn't result in his attempt to interfere with either the date of the election or the mechanism by which people vote. You can see how they're trying to slow down the delivery of the first-class mail with the Postal Service. I mean, but you're going to see more illegality from Bill Barr because that's what he does.
Yeah, and just finally on Barr purging the Southern District, the Eastern District of New York, out in Brooklyn. Can you kind of lay out what exactly happened there?
So what happened there was Bill Barr had I think it's Ducharme is his last name, who was, it's a long backstory because Ducharme started at the Brooklyn office, Eastern District of New York, U.S. Attorney's Office. But Bill Barr brought him over to the department. And here's where it gets ugly and nefarious. He had all Ukrainian investigations run through Ducharme, which is really unusual, maybe unprecedented. He obviously wanted this one guy, his close associate, to get a handle on all things Ukraine. And then he takes him and he swaps him with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. He puts him in Ducharme's job at the Department of Justice, and he puts Ducharme heading up the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn. Why? There's something coming on the Ukraine front, and it's going to come out of the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney's Office. So what it is it Hunter Biden? Is it who the heck knows? But all of these U.S. attorney pieces that Bill Barr has been moving around have been nefarious. The worst one was in D.C. when he plucked out U.S. Attorney Jesse Liu, my former colleague, my friend, my former U.S. attorney, the last U.S. attorney that I worked for and retired under, plucked her out because she wasn't going to do Trump's nefarious bidding. So he put his man Tim Shea in as U.S. attorney and promptly went about trying to dismiss Mike Flynn's case and trying to give Roger Stone a more lenient sentence. They're not fooling anyone. They're criming in the harsh light of day. So that's what's going on with Bill Barr nefariously moving around these U.S. attorneys.
Yes, very well. Thank you. I think you cleared it up for a lot of people who didn't understand it. I was a little confused. Finally, the invoking Lincoln, the GOP now saying that Lincoln was a Republican. How cynical is that to you?
There is no level to which they will not sink. I mean, that's where we are. And, you know, my only remaining question, I hope I get an answer to it someday, is why? Are they compromised? Are they all compromised by big money that is, I don't know, funneled through the NRA, but originates in Russia? Is that what this is? Or is it just their zeal to be reelected so they don't want to have a nasty tweet sent about them? A former congressman for a long time said to me, I asked him this question: what is it that causes the Republicans to act the way they do and to let our country burn by letting Trump run roughshod over it? And he said, look, members of Congress spend a minimum of 5 hours every day on the phone fundraising. The good ones, the honest ones, the honorable ones, every single one of them, all they're driven by is reelection. So maybe it's as simple as they don't want to lose their job. And if they buck Donald Trump and actually protect the interests of their constituents, they run the risk of losing their next election. It would be sad if that's what motivates them, but maybe that's what it is.
Well, speaking of Lincoln, this could be maybe even more so, or as pivotal as the 1860 election between Stephen Douglas and Abe Lincoln. And on that note, I want to thank you very much, Glenn. This hour went by real quickly. You know, I said, can you do 30 minutes? I mean, you could do that in your sleep. So it's stuck soup for you. We're going to play, we're going to go out. This is an 1860s campaign tune called Lincoln and Liberty 2. And and it really helped Lincoln in 1860. And this is a version done by the Weavers, and it's really nice. And we're going to go out with that. And you take care of yourself and be careful, because I know if the orange guy wins, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and they're going to have to do a John Valjean, and they kind of like flit around. All right, don't get caught. All right, Glenn Kirschner, thanks a lot, buddy. And
Thanks,
we'll
Randy.
talk to you soon. All right, this
Appreciate
is
it.
Lincoln and Liberty 2 by the Weavers. We'll be right back with some closing remarks. Thank you, everybody. Well, thank you, Glenn.
Hurrah for the choice of the nation, our chieftain so brave and so true. We'll go for the great Reformation, for Lincoln and Liberty too. We'll go for the son of Kentucky, the hero of Hoosierdom through. The pride of the suckers so lucky, for Lincoln and Liberty too. Then up with the banner so glorious, the star-spangled red, white, and blue. We'll fight till our banner's victorious, for Lincoln and Liberty too. All you true friends of the nation, attend to humanity's call. Come aid in the slaves' liberation, and roll on the Liberty Ball. And roll on the Liberty Ball, and roll on the Liberty Ball. Come aid in the slaves' liberation, and roll on the Liberty Ball. We'll finish the temple of freedom, and make it capacious within, that all who seek shelter may find it, whatever the hue of their skin. Whatever the hue of their skin, whatever the hue of their skin, that all who seek shelter may find it, whatever the hue of their skin. Success to the old-fashioned doctrine that men are created all free, and down with the power of the despot wherever his stronghold may be. Wherever his stronghold may be, wherever his stronghold may be, and down with the power of the despot wherever his stronghold may be.
The Weavers, Lincoln and Liberty 2. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly. And I want to thank Glenn Kirschner for giving us so much of his time. He's very smart and very entertaining, and I look forward to interviewing him again many times between now and the election, which could be like 100 years from now. I want to thank Kelly Lane, who is the editor and the engineer and co-produces this show with me live on the fly. I will be doing my radio show at WBAI again after a 3-year hiatus, Tuesday nights, 2:30 in the afternoon to begin with, and we'll see what happens. You can go to 99.5 FM in New York or go to WBAI.org. I also want to thank Sarah and Emily Kunstler and Margaret Ratner Kunstler for their contribution to the website and to the liner notes or show description here. All right, we are going to be doing a lot of election stuff here on Live on the Fly, right here at this YouTube channel, which we just started. We also have another Assange Countdown to Freedom. Not everyone who's watching this right now is going to like that website, but yeah, open mind here. And what else? I think that's just about it. We're gonna play something that we've played many times over the last couple of months, and this is a kind of a memorial to those who have fallen victim to police violence. And this is Strange Fruit by the late, great Billie Holiday. See you soon. Thank you very much. With what has happened, the last 2 centuries, African Americans gunned down by law enforcement, enslaved, put to work, convict leasing, put in jail with the drug war. But in the last week, it's really heated up, and it's got to stop.
Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the tree to drop. Here's a strange and bitter cry.